Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a good show for you tonight. We have so much news leading up to the election here in the U.S. of A. Coming up for Tuesday. Lots of news about that. There's been some breakthroughs overseas, so we've got a lot of overseas news as well. We have some videos from Jorge Cervantes and a video about hemp fuel, one of our favorite things here. So stay tuned as we bring on our infamous dancing cannabis leaves.
I feel the force.
Okay, Dana Canales has stepped in here. Hey, Dana, good to see you. And we have our first story is from south of the border. Justices for Mexico's Supreme Court have ruled that laws criminalizing the private use and cultivation of cannabis by adults are unconstitutional. You know, we've always known that they were unconstitutional. Finally, the Mexican Supreme Court has ruled 5 times that the law is unconstitutional. The justices opine, quote, the effects caused by marijuana do not create an absolute prohibition on its consumption, end quote. In accordance with the ruling, lawmakers may enact regulatory policies governing adults' personal marijuana use, but they must repeal those laws that broadly prohibit marijuana use per se. By contrast, neither commercial marijuana production or sales are addressed by Mexico's Supreme Court ruling. Mexico's Congress has 90 days to repeal cannabis bans now considered unconstitutional. When will the United States Supreme Court say that it's unconstitutional, that we have an inherent right to use cannabis? I don't think they ever will, especially with some of the recent people who've been appointed. In September, South Africa's highest court similarly struck down laws criminalizing the personal private consumption of cannabis by adults. Mexican lawmakers in 2009 decriminalized possession of small amounts of cannabis, 5 grams or less, and other substances. Last month, Canada began licensing the retail production and sale of cannabis for those 18 years and older. Out of Washington, D.C., staffers for the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws on Wednesday hand-delivered over 10,000 public comments to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, calling on the agency to recommend amending the substance's illicit status under international treaties. The agency had requested public comments so that they could be considered in preparing a response from the United States to the World Health Organization regarding the abuse, liability, and diversion of marijuana and certain other substances. It's the second time this year that the FDA has sought feedback with regard to cannabis scheduling. In April, NORML also delivered another 10,000 written signatures, and that amounted to a little bit less than 50% of the members of the public who responded to the Federal Food and Drug Administration. Writing on behalf of NORML, Deputy Director Paul Armanto opined that cannabis be removed from the International Drug Convention so that nations that wish to do so may further expand their regulations covering cannabis use, possession, production, and dispensing for either recreational or medical use. Out of Denver, Colorado, the Colorado Department of Public Safety has issued its first ever baseline reporting assessing the impact of adult use marijuana regulations in Colorado. Lawmakers in 2013 passed legislation authorizing regulators to conduct a 5-year review which seeks to better identify ways in which legalization has impacted public health and safety. The authors reported that the total number of marijuana arrests fell 52% between the years 2012 and 2017. In Denver, marijuana arrests fell 81% over the same period. The authors also reported that youth marijuana use has largely remained unchanged since legalization. The report acknowledged no significant change in the past 30-day use of marijuana between 2013 and 2017. The authors further reported that marijuana use by Colorado teens in 2017 was virtually no different than the national average. By contrast, the percentage of Colorado adults reporting marijuana use increased from 13.6% in 2014 to 15.5% this year. The authors acknowledged that police are now more likely to make DUI arrests for drivers suspected of being under the influence of cannabis. Specifically, 15% of DUI arrests in 2017 there in the state of Colorado involved cannabis versus 12% in 2014. However, the authors caution that this uptick may be partially due to an increase in the number of law enforcement officers who are trained in recognizing drug use rather than as a result of any changes in driving behavior. The authors further reported that the total number of drivers involved in fatal accidents with elevated THC blood levels over 5 milligrams fell between 2016 and 2017. This report, Impacts of Marijuana Legalization in Colorado, report pursuant to Senate Bill 13-283, appears online. And then in New York City, statistics released by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office suggest New York City has nearly stopped prosecuting marijuana cases since decriminalizing public use and possession on August 1st. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office said Thursday that prosecutors arraigned 168 marijuana cases during the first 90 days of the new cannabis policy taking effect, are nearly 87% fewer than the 1,246 initiated during that same 90-day span last year. Prosecutors arraigned 28 marijuana cases in all of October 2018, down 94% compared to 12 months earlier. Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr. noted in a social media post touting the numbers on Twitter, quote, "We've exited the marijuana business. Now it's time for New York State to legalize, regulate, and expunge," end quote. Mr. Vance had instructed the New York City Department of Police to stop arresting people caught merely possessing small amounts of marijuana or smoking the plant in public, effective August 1st. And he previously said officials intend to proactively seal the past convictions of individuals previously arrested for related offenses. Black and Hispanic people made up 86% of the roughly 17,000 people arrested by the New York Police Department last year for low-level marijuana offenses, according to the state's own statistics, illustrating what Mr. Vance previously called an unjustifiable and intolerable racial disparity he hoped to remedy with the rule change. He said, quote, "Every day I ask our prosecutors to keep Manhattan safe and make our justice system more equal and fair. The needless criminalization of cannabis smoking frustrates the core mission, so we're removing ourselves from the equation," end quote. Of the 168 marijuana cases arraigned during the first 90 days of the new policy, 145 were either ultimately dismissed or adjourned, according to the district attorney's office. 17 of the remaining marijuana cases were prosecuted under an exemption that allows police to arrest individuals who demonstrate a threat to public safety. 5 were prosecuted under an exemption that applies to suspected drug dealers, and 1 was joined to another pending case. Despite the clear decline in marijuana cases, activists said the racial disparity had hardly disappeared. Court Watch New York City, a legal advocacy group, said in a report of its own Thursday that drug prosecutions in New York City continue to disproportionately target Black and Hispanic people regardless of the rule change, citing a recent study of over 233 cases pending in local court. Thailand is hoping to become the first country in Asia to legalize medical marijuana and tap into the burgeoning cannabis market, according to Agence France Presse. According to a Thai official, a draft bill now under consideration proposes allowing marijuana for medicinal purposes, a considerable change in a country with tough drug trafficking laws. Jet Sirathratnan, The Public Health Committee chair of Thailand's National Legislative Assembly emphasized that marijuana would be legal for medication only, not for recreation. But he added that legalizing the drug could be an economic boon and an opportunity for Thai people. The global medical marijuana market could reach $55 billion by 2025, according to an analysis published last year. Thailand's Public Health Committee chair expects Thailand could capture a good share of the multi-billion-dollar market with what he hailed as the best marijuana in the world. During the 1980s, Thailand was one of the world's largest exporters of marijuana, famous for Thai sticks, according to Bloomberg. The move would allow Thailand to take advantage of a rapidly expanding industry which promises to aid patients suffering from conditions like arthritis, migraines, and cancer. Thailand would join a growing cohort of nations where the drug is legal for medical use, including Australia, Germany, Israel, and Canada. America's northern neighbor recently legalized marijuana for recreational purposes and pardoned those convicted of minor possession in the past. Medical marijuana is currently legal in 31 United States states and the District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. Legislatures. For now, marijuana remains illegal in Thailand with severe punishments for those convicted of drug trafficking. A prominent smuggler from neighboring Laos was sentenced to life in prison in Bangkok in March. He had initially faced the death penalty. In a victory for international advocates of both cannabis and basic human rights, the government of Malaysia has announced a reprieve in the case of a medical marijuana doctor and provider who was sentenced to be hanged. This news is especially welcome as it comes as many Southeast Asian nations are moving in the opposite direction toward intolerant drug war policies and the aggressive use of the death penalty for drug offenses. But the change in Malaysia's penal code hasn't happened yet, and it still remains unclear if it will come in time to save the life of the celebrated doctor defendant. Malaysia's cabinet chief Lu View Kyong announced on October 10th that his government will seek to abolish the death penalty in the next session of the country's parliament, which opens this week. This comes 2 weeks after Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, at 92 years old, the oldest ruler of any nation on earth, he's called his cabinet to amend the death penalty statutes in direct response to the global outcry over the death sentence delivered to cannabis oil producer Mohammed Luqman. Hopefully Luqman's execution will be placed on hold while the legislative change is pending. Nurul Anwar, a parliamentarian from Mahathir's ruling coalition, said she would write a letter to the Attorney General's office asking for the sentence to be put aside. She said, quote, "From reports it looks like a miscarriage of justice," end quote, to say the least. According to Channel News Asia, Mohammed Luqman was convicted and sentenced to death by a court in the city of Shah Alam in Malaysia on August 30th. He was charged under Malaysia's unforgiving 1952 Dangerous Drug Act for possession of 3.1 liters, about 100 fluid ounces of cannabis oil, and 279 grams of compressed cannabis, or about 10 ounces. A local media reported he'd been arrested at his residence in December 2015, along with his wife, who was then 6 months pregnant. Luqman's attorney argued that he was not involved in any criminal enterprise, but was collaborating with advocacy organizations like Malaysia's Ganja Education Movement to provide cannabis oil to the ailing. For those who were too poor to pay, it was provided for free, demonstrating that Luqman's own operation was not a profit-making entity. Several of Luqman's hundreds of patients, including his mother, testified in court on his behalf. So did Professor Muhammad Aris Mohd Maklis, a neuroscience researcher from the University of Putra, Malaysia, who presented his recent paper on cannabis and brain function, delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol-induced neurogenesis and improved cognition performance of male Sprague Dawley rats, end quote. What would make the Malaysian repeal of the death penalty particularly significant is that it could begin to reverse the regional trend and currently heading in a more draconian direction. Southeast Asia has one of the world's highest execution rates. In nations such as Singapore and Indonesia, even minor drug offenses can result in a death penalty. A 2011 report by the Anti-Death Penalty Asia Network said, quote, when justice fails, thousands executed in Asia after unfair trials found that the legal system in the region often fails to meet international standards, with mandatory death sentences imposed on the basis of confessions extracted under torture. Presumption of guilt and denial of the right to counsel are other factors that contribute to the unjust trials and convictions. In the Philippines, President Rodrigo Duterte's draconian drug war has resulted in perhaps 20,000 extrajudicial killings by police and paramilitary forces since he took office 2 years ago. And his grim example is being emulated by other leaders across South and Southeast Asia. Sri Lanka, island off the coast of India, has announced that it will start hanging drug convicts, with leaders explicitly hoping to replicate the success, they say, of Duterte's bloody anti-drug campaign. There's even some reason to believe that Malaysia could go beyond mere repeal of the death penalty and actually become the first Southeast Asian nation to legalize medical marijuana. Maybe Malaysia, maybe Thailand. Amid the cabinet meetings to discuss abolishing capital punishment, Natural Resources Minister Xavier Jakumar told reporters that the idea had been very briefly discussed. He said, quote, it's already been done in certain countries and in certain states in America. If it's going to be used for medicinal purposes, it can be used. Not for social purposes, for medicinal purposes. Yes, it should be allowed to be used, end quote. While emphasizing that the health ministry would have the final word, Xavier said, quote, my own personal view is that if it's got medicinal value, then it can be a controlled item that can be used by the Ministry of Health for prescription purposes, end quote. In the United Kingdom this week, the medicinal cannabis products can now be legally prescribed to some patients across the UK for the first time. The treatments can be prescribed only by specialist doctors in a limited number of circumstances where other medicines have failed. The decision to relax the rules on the treatment followed an outcry over 2 boys with severe epilepsy being denied access to cannabis oil. But one charity fears access to it will be much more limited than expected. They're only giving it out to a few people through pharmacies. Among those who stand to benefit will be children with rare, severe forms of epilepsy. As of Thursday, cannabis-based products can be prescribed, but only by specialist hospital doctors in small number of cases, and not by general practitioners. New National Health Service guidelines for doctors in England say it should be prescribed only when there's clear published evidence of its benefit and other treatment options have been exhausted. The treatments can be prescribed now in the UK for cases of children with rare, severe forms of epilepsy, adults with vomiting or nausea caused by chemotherapy, and adults with muscle stiffness caused by multiple sclerosis. Well, again, let's talk about Election Day, which is this Tuesday, November 6th, here in the United States. Don't forget to vote if you haven't already. No matter where you live or what political party you identify with, your vote counts. It matters. It can make a difference. It's your civic duty to exercise your right to vote. Make sure you know where your voting location is. Here in Oregon, we just mail our ballots in. And make sure you know who and what is on your ballot so you can make an informed decision. Again, it's too late now here in Oregon or anywhere else really to mail those ballots in, so you have to take them in person if you haven't previously mailed them. The lucrative legal cannabis industry is again front and center this voting year as Americans head to the polls for midterm elections November 6th. Ballots across the U.S. will include numerous cannabis-related measures, many at the county and municipal level, regarding laws for commercial cultivation in certain zones and how to spend abundant new cannabis taxes. In Colorado alone, legal cannabis revenues for 2018 crested a record $1 billion by August. The state's forecasting to gross over $1.5 billion by the end of the year, meaning more than $250 million into government coffers. Several U.S. states will also vote on both adult use and medical cannabis legalization. North Dakota and Michigan will decide on ballot initiatives for recreational cannabis for adults 21 and over. Both of those are ahead in the polls. And they're ahead in the polls in Utah and Missouri, where they'll cast ballots on medical cannabis legalization. There are also 35 U.S. Senate seats up for grabs and 36 races for governor. And you can bet that those candidates are well aware that nothing brings out the vote, particularly the youth vote, like having cannabis on the ballot. Having already reached a tipping point of popularity in the United States, with 66% of Americans agreeing that marijuana should be legalized, candidates nationwide are currently more willing than ever to include cannabis endorsements in their platforms. Political contenders in many states are following the green, as a projection by BDS Analytics puts worldwide consumer spending on legal cannabis at roughly $57 billion by 2027. In the highly contentious race for Florida's governorship, candidates Andrew Gillum and Ron DeSantis are battling it out with clashing and irreconcilable political views, including opinions on health care, climate change, and gun control. Yet, regarding the once controversial topic of marijuana legalization, they're both supportive. Gilliam tweeted earlier this year, "Legalize it, tax it, use the revenue to fix Florida's public schools and move us up from 29th in the nation to number 1, end quote. The Republican DeSantis was a bit more cautious, but still pro-weed, telling Florida's TV WPLG 10 News, quote, "I'm going to implement the will of the voters. They passed medical marijuana overwhelmingly, and my view is we have a process in Florida. When that happens, then we shouldn't play games with it. We should simply implement it," end quote. Whoever becomes Florida's next governor will certainly have a lot to say over the state's evolving and highly profitable medical marijuana system, and over any potential recreational legalization efforts going forward. There's no better evidence of marijuana's widespread popularity than Canada's decision to make cannabis legal for adult use across the country just last month on the 17th. As cannabis retailers, they're contend with high demand and inventory shortfalls since legal weed sales fired up on October 17th. It's clear that consumers want this substance available. Buyers in the U.S. are signaling the same, as 31 states have legalized it for medicinal purposes, and 9 states and the District of Columbia have legalized the drug for recreational adult use. The message to candidates in many pro-marijuana regions clear: go against the rising tide of cannabis legalization at your own peril. In California, where statewide recreational cannabis sales kicked off in January, Marijuana Business Daily reports that many jurisdictions in the state are still grappling with ironing out local marijuana laws. Some 82 cannabis-related ballot measures are slated to go before voters in cities and counties across the Golden State. Those measures will include regulations for cannabis entrepreneurs to operate within their borders, new licensing opportunities, and setting tax rates. For instance, in Bakersfield, Measure J seeks to retain the ban on commercial adult-use cannabis activity, but allow and regulate commercial medicinal cannabis cultivation, manufacturing, testing, retailing, distribution, and micro-businesses in the unincorporated area of the county. In conservative-leaning Montana, a state that's had a contentious history the past few years with legal medical marijuana, U.S. Senate candidate and current Senator Democrat John Tester, who's currently ahead in the polls, said during a House Committee on Foreign Affairs meeting this year, quote, "Veterans must have a say in how they manage their pain, and the VA needs to listen to those veterans who are finding relief in medicinal cannabis," end quote. While midterm elections consistently have a much lower turnout compared with general elections, ballot measures can have a significant effect on who shows up to vote and subsequent outcomes. Cannabis looks to be one of the key motivators this year to get out the vote. In the United States Congress this week, the U.S. House bill to require the federal government to study the effects of legalizing marijuana, known as the Marijuana Data Collection Act, got 2 new co-sponsors for a total of 33. The Oregon Liquor Control Commission, which also regulates adult use marijuana, will hold public hearings on technical changes to the marijuana rules coming up on November 16th. We'll discuss this in more detail next week. Utah lawmakers and advocates are working to tweak provisions of the proposed medical cannabis compromise legislation. The Utah House Speaker also held a public forum on the issue. The other side of the country, New Hampshire's Marijuana Legalization Study Committee released a lengthy report looking at policy considerations for the potential end of prohibition. New Hampshire has medical next door and all around them. In Maine, Vermont, and Massachusetts, they have recreational adult use as well. New Mexico lawmakers held a hearing on allowing medical cannabis at schools. Separately, a New Mexico judge ruled that the state's 450 plant limit on medical cannabis dispensaries is arbitrary and capricious and has no factual basis. Maine regulators are estimating that the first recreational marijuana stores could open next year. Colorado regulators will host the Marijuana Science and Policy Workgroup meeting on Monday. Colorado regulators are inviting people to make comments on proposed changes to medical cannabis rules. In Ohio, regulators are now accepting petitions to add additional medical cannabis qualifying conditions. In Pennsylvania, Governor Tom Wolf signed a bill into law to stop revoking driver's licenses for people convicted of drug offenses and other crimes unrelated to motor vehicle operation. At a more local level, San Francisco's mayor announced the expansion of the city's cannabis equity program to allow minorities to have first dibs on licenses. Out in Nebraska, Nebraska state troopers in western Nebraska have reported finding more than 360 pounds of marijuana and cannabis products in a traffic stop near Lodgepole, Nebraska, arresting a Medford, Oregon man. The Nebraska State Patrol said in a news release Thursday that the seizure stemmed from a traffic stop around noon Wednesday on Interstate 80. A trooper reported that he'd stopped a minivan driven by Ryan Kirk, who's 33, for having an expired license plate and smelled marijuana coming from inside the vehicle. A friend of mine from Nebraska said he's been pulled over for not having proper license plates when he did, so we'll see about that. The Nebraska State Patrol says that a search of the van turned up 309 pounds of marijuana, 46 pounds of edible cannabis products, 14 pounds of concentrated cannabis shatter, and 80 grams of cannabis syrup, and 2,000 cannabis vape cartridges. The street value of the haul is estimated at more than $1 million. It's not worth that here in Oregon, though. From Brazil, we have a medical study. Bad news in Brazil with the election of a fascist president there. But this medical study says the administration of cannabidiol reduces anxiety in healthy subjects, according to placebo-controlled clinical trial data published in the Brazilian Journal of Psychiatry. Investigators from the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil and Hebrew University in Israel compared the efficacy of varying doses of CBD versus placebo in a cohort of 57 participants performing a simulated public speaking test. The authors reported that the administration of 300 milligrams of CBD significantly reduced anxiety compared to placebo. By contrast, higher doses of 600 milligrams and lower doses of 150 milligrams of CBD provided little therapeutic benefit. The study's authors concluded our findings confirm the anxiolytic-like properties of CBD are consonant with the results of animal studies describing bell-shaped dose-response curves. Optimal therapeutic doses of CBD should be determined so that research findings can be adequately translated into clinical practice, end quote. This study, cannabidiol presents an inverted U-shaped dose-response curve in a simulated public speaking test, appears in the Brazilian Journal of Psychiatry. Our next story is from Salem, Massachusetts. Hepatitis C patients who use cannabis are less likely to contract liver cirrhosis as compared to matched controls, according to data published in the Canadian Journal of Gastroenterology and Hepatology. A team of researchers from the United States and Canada assessed the effect of cannabis use on chronic liver disease in a cohort of 4,728 patients with the hepatitis C virus versus 4,728 non-users. The authors reported that the subjects who consumed cannabis, quote, had decreased prevalence of liver cirrhosis and had significantly lower total healthcare costs compared to non-cannabis users, end quote. The authors concluded, quote, our findings suggest that cannabis use is associated with decreased incidence of liver cirrhosis, end quote. Prior studies have reported that cannabis use is associated with reduced incidences of fibrosis and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in patients with the hepatitis C virus. This study reduced incidence and better liver disease outcomes among chronic HCV infected patients who consume cannabis, appears in the Canadian Journal of Gastroenterology and Hepatology. Next study is from London in the United Kingdom. Regular users of marijuana demonstrate limited or in some cases no impairment on measurements of either cognitive or psychomotor performance, according to data published in the journal Neuroscience and Behavioral Reviews. British researchers conducted a systematic review of all human trials examining whether subjects exhibit tolerance to the effects of cannabis following repeated dosing. 36 trials involving over 100 subjects were included in their review. The authors reported that repeated exposure to either cannabis or THC was associated with partial or full tolerance in subjects, particularly with regard to cognitive performance and psychomotor abilities. They reported, quote, studies indicate relatively minor or no effects of repeated delta-9 THC administration in regular users on a number of cognitive domains, including learning, memory, vigilance, and psychomotor ability. This absence of effect in RU might indicate the development of full tolerance, end quote. The investigators concluded, quote, available evidence suggests that the effects of acute marijuana or delta-9 THC administration are less prominent in individuals with a regular pattern of cannabis use compared to non-regular users. Cognitive function appears to be the domain most likely to demonstrate tolerance upon repeated exposure, with some evidence of full tolerance indicating a complete absence of acute effect. The acute intoxicating and cardiac effects of delta-9 THC are also blunted upon regular exposure. Similar but limited evidence also suggests blunted acute psychomimetic effects of delta-9 THC in individuals using cannabis regularly, end quote. The full text of this study, Cannabis Use and the Development of Tolerance, a Systematic Review of Human Evidence, appears in Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews. That is the end of our lengthy news segment for tonight. We'll be back in just a moment. We have a song here by a friend of ours, Seattle folk singer Jim Page. We need to take our culture back. We'll be right back.
This song is for Vivian McPeak, who may or may not be here. He's going to be here sometime or other. He was here yesterday. It's good to be here, to come all the way down from Seattle on I-5. Yeah, it's a long-ass drive down through Olympia, Tacoma, Centralia. You're finally hitting Vancouver, you know, and there's that, and there's the river right in front of you. And that big bridge, that says, big sign that says, welcome to Hempstock. With an arrow pointing over to the right, which is actually the left, if you know what I'm saying. Well, let's take our culture back. Take our culture back. Get the monkey off of your back and take our culture back. Well, now we've been here for a million years, music filling up the people's ears, and we always sang our own song until the music business came along. Well, I don't know, I could be wrong, but I ain't about to just tag along behind somebody with a bankroll hanging out, telling me what I can sing about. So let's take our culture back, take our culture back, get the monkey off of your back and take our culture back. Hollywood spectacle and promenade. Think of all that money just waiting to be made, and all you gotta do is go. You'll be sitting up pretty on Gangsters Row, and it ain't smart to be misled by some Beavis and Butthead. You can have your hip Seattle slacker, just give me a good computer hack. Well, let's take our culture back. Take our culture back. WikiLeaks, take the government off your back and take our culture back. Yep. Get inside to break it out. You gotta be outside to know what I'm talking about. 2 heads and a million eyes, and we can cut this thing right down to size. Now culture is a weaponry, and all our great humanity, and survival is a counterattack. So let's take our culture back. Let's take our culture back. Take our culture back. Get the monkey off of your back and take our culture back right now.
All right, that is Mr. Jim Page at the 2014 Hempstock when we had them out there at Kelly Point Park. The Port of Portland hated that. They never wanted us to have our Hempstock Festival out there, so they forced us to move. But
that was one of our best locations.
oh, it was the best location.
Yeah,
It definitely was the best location. I picked it out because it's right at the convergence of the Willamette and the Columbia River, 2 of the largest rivers here in the West. So, but the Port of Portland hated us being out there. They fought to make sure no one would allow us to park on empty parking lots or anywhere, just so they could crush us, which is one of the, there's another group trying to crush us, and that's why we have this banner turned around. An Israeli-Canadian oil company by the name of Adira Energy has got a court order to take over our business in a preliminary injunction. And we're going to court on it in March of next year. At that point, it will have been 33 months since that happened. And so we have this turned around here. Even though I am the president of the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation and THCF, the Israeli-Canadian corporate raiders have an order that I can be fined $500 a day if I claim to be affiliated with my company that I run, my nonprofit Oregon corporation.
I wonder what they'd do if I wore my crew shirt with the THCF logo. That
I
I've
don't
owned
think
for
I
more than 10
have no
years, yeah.
you don't have any court orders.
Yeah.
I couldn't be fined because of what you do. I don't think.
Hope
But-
not.
Hey, if you have any questions for us tonight, give us a call at that number there on your screen. It's 503-288-4442. That's 503-288-4442. Thanks for coming in, though. I appreciate it.
Absolutely happy to be here. You know, it's the time of year that people are going with a lot of processing with their harvest.
We
you
had
know,
questions about that. I
very
was trying to
fortunate
find a
harvests.
place to process. Do you know about?
Well, I've heard of a couple of people that I might be able to help, like
Yeah, but is there a
put-
legal licensed processor that is actually? I put out a call to our friend Eric Llewellyn, and he claimed some friend of ours, Pat and Darcy. I know they have all the licenses you can have here in Oregon.
Right.
Whether they would do it, but I asked him if he could find out. I didn't hear anything back though. So,
Yeah.
Jim, I'm still researching. I don't have the information yet, but I'm trying. We have a video that a friend of mine who made hemp plastic in England and now makes hemp food in Australia, Paul Benham, has put out there on YouTube. A friend of mine I last saw at the Hemp Environmental Conference in Kyoto, Japan, just about 2 years ago. So we're going to run that video, and we'll be back in just a moment. Stay tuned. Thanks. Maybe we're going to run it. We're all volunteer here, so I think that hemp video is coming. Yeah. Well, maybe it will come. There are technical difficulties, I am told.
Well, you can call the show also. We love to answer questions with our own knowledge or experience about, helping process or, make your marijuana usable in the fashion that you choose or works best for you. So.
I just vaporize my flowers in my volcano. You know that's what I like to do. I've been doing it now for 15 years. But I will take a dab now and then. In fact, the corporate raiders in court put up a picture in court during that preliminary injunction hearing of me taking a dab at the Seattle Hemp Fest. They put that up on the screen.
Wow.
Yeah, to show the judge what a dirty guy I am.
That's really scraping the bottom, I'm telling you.
Yeah. Well, I was me in there by myself against 3 lawyers and 4 paralegals.
Heaven forbid you, Paul Stanford, have smoked marijuana.
Yeah. Well, you know, I've got to confess.
Well, once in a while we slip, right?
Yeah. They must not have heard me announce the video in there. I'm asking, which video do you want us to run?
No.
This one, the hemp fuel one. Maybe it'll be ready here in just a minute. But it's a pretty good little animation. I think we've run it in the past, but not for a while. We'll be right back. I think it's ready.
What's up? It's me, your pal, Peace Bud. Today I would like to introduce to you the future of renewable energy sources for America and the planet. My friend, the cannabis plant. A great deal of propaganda has been created to slander this totally beneficial plant. But did you know that the evolution of human society has depended on this wonderful plant for centuries? Cannabis hemp has been used throughout history to make fabrics, rope, and paper. It is completely renewable, easy to propagate, and it produces high yields in almost any environment. Cannabis is the only plant that can support the energy needs of our economy. Did you know that our cars were originally intended to run on a cannabis-based fuel source called ethanol? Henry Ford's original Model T was built from plastics made out of hemp. The vehicle was to run on a hemp-based ethanol fuel, which was grown on Mr. Ford's property. He figured hemp would completely take care of his newly emerging automobile industry. But as the Industrial Revolution grew, and new chemicals and mechanical processes became possible, other industries stepped in to dictate what the new resource for the 20th century would be. The Rockefellers worked hard to establish relationships with Middle Eastern oil monarchies, smudging the dream of ethanol, combined with the DuPont's new chemical processes to create plastics from oil, paper from wood, and a new type of synthetic rope called nylon. And in 1938, by request of big oil companies such as the DuPonts and the Rockefellers, cannabis was outlawed in the United States. We now live in the outcome of the Industrial Revolution, and our machines have become reliant on oil. Now we have to reconfigure our world, or slip into darkness. Oil is an economy based on death. Its pursuit has caused nothing but wars and inequities, for the oil industry harvests the ancient remains of dead animals, while a fuel economy based on growing cannabis is one of life and creation. The situation our world is in because of oil is absurd. Join me in the new revolution of the 21st century. Legalize cannabis and create a new era of peace, prosperity, and renewable energy.
We have our hemp flame of freedom. This is hemp oil right here with hemp oil right in this little container. Here is the wick that will be on in that oil next week. This was at the end of that roll. And then right here we have hempcrete. This is powdered limestone mixed with hemp fiber that makes a material lighter and stronger than concrete. So that can solve, with hemp fiber, we can make building materials, cannabis, rope, lace, canvas, rope, lace, and linen. In fact, the word canvas comes from the word cannabis, the Latin root. So that's a little bit of information out there. Yeah, you just said they should put that out there on all the channels so people can find out.
Yeah, that's a great ad right there for getting the message out there. And I could see that literally in that network spot, in a commercial spot, somewhere between, you know, a commercial break, because that's very user friendly and very honest and right forward, and I think it's very supportive of the truth and our goals. So
I think so as well. So we have some other videos by our friend Jorge Cervantes. You know, I get asked by people pretty frequently what to do about the leaves on their plants when they're flowering. And I always tell them, you know, there are these mobile nutrients. That means the plant can move the nutrients around inside its body, like nitrogen. And there are immobile nutrients, like magnesium. So when you have a mobile nutrient deficiency, it will usually show up at the bottom of the plant and on the tips of the leaves, where immobile nutrient deficiencies appear at the top of the plant. And so, but here, Jorge answers the question about what to do with those leaves. We'll be right back after this video.
You know, it's okay to pick these dead leaves off like this because they're already spent out and everything. They're not adding anything to the plant. But a plant like this, a bud like this, keep the leaves on. Keep the leaves on. Because you'll notice, some people are going to want to argue, but you can look this up. This is based on science, not hearsay, not empirical observation, science. You start pulling these leaves off before they die back like this, and then it's going to slow the bud down. People pull the leaves off thinking it's going to get more sun. No, 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 no. It gets sun, sure, it'll get more sun, but this leaf has got a lot of food in it. It's got sugars and starches and carbohydrates. This leaf, let it die and then pull it off. Or let it get yellow, real yellow like this. This one's ready to come off here. Or no, I might even leave that on for another day or two. But these, fine, take them off. Those aren't adding anything. But you yank all these leaves off this plant, the bud will look cool. You'll be happy that you did, you know, you'll think you did something. But what you're really doing is you're retarding the leaf or retarding the bud. You're making it grow slower. That's weird. So do not pull the leaves off until the day before harvest for convenience, but you're slowing everything down. Please remember, keep your leaves on.
Your favorite Jorge Cervantes book is now available as an ebook. Download it today.
That's good
You
to
can
know.
watch him. Yeah, I learned a lot from his books. I know I told him when I first met him back in the early 1980s that his books had taught me a lot. He had to wear a disguise in all those earlier videos, you know.
he
People
used
thought
to.
he had long dreadlocks. And
Yeah, he was
black
fun
hair.
to watch, you know. Had to do what he had to do, but he got the message out,
he did.
you know.
Finally able to come out of the closet and say who he is. So happy about that. I'm expecting to see him here right after Thanksgiving in Medellin, Colombia, at the Expo Mediweed.
Oh, cool, you're
Yeah,
going again.
I'm going to go again. They invited me back. They're paying my wife and my way down there and putting us up in a nice room and paying me a little bit of money. So I'm happy with that.
Heck, well,
Yeah.
How can you pass up that opportunity?
That's right. Medellin is a beautiful city. It's at about 4,500 feet elevation. So even though it's right on the equator, it's always about 60 degrees at night, 75 in the day, year
Nice.
round.
Very
They
nice.
always have 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of nighttime year round because it's right on the equator. Makes it hard about flowering plants, or especially hard to grow them in a vegetative state.
That's why there's those networks of lights over their plants, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. We're down to just about 9 minutes left. We have another video with another friend of ours from right here in Oregon, Dave Sieber. Dave has been working with hemp for years. He has developed a hemp product, hemp shield, that goes on wood to stain it and seal it. It's a environmentally sound product. Here's Dave Sieber at the Seattle Hemp Fest last year. We'll be right back. I think it's coming. Oh, well, they had the other Jorge's, but it was too long.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, there was another Jorge video. We're down to just about 8 minutes, so so it goes. Okay. So if you want to find out how to find a doctor who can help you get a medical marijuana permit, then contact us. We have a physician referral service. You can call our office, that number that just popped up on your screen. It's 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. We have doctors who we can refer you to all around the nation. If you have any of these conditions or any others you think might qualify for medical marijuana, then call us at 503-235-4606. We'll be happy to help you. Had a call in this week saying, hey, I'm in Dayton, Ohio. Can you find a doctor? Well, we had a doctor right there in Dayton, Ohio, ready to help them. So that was a good thing. I think this video is ready to roll. We'll be right back. I'm hoping. Okay.
Well, I guess we're.
Well, just run the other one then. I don't know. You know, we're all volunteers here, so you know, it's cable access. So what can I say?
Here I have hydrogen peroxide, H2O2. This is a 3% solution. This is the stuff you find down there at the drugstore. You find this stuff anywhere. You know, you use it for a million different reasons. You can use it for sterilizing cuts and whatnot. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up and pour in here a cup, or just a little less than a cup. And a cup is 8 ounces. And if you look at it in milliliters, it's about 230 milliliters. So you can go anywhere from 200 to 250 milliliters. 6 to 8 ounces is fine. But that's with the 3% solution. If you have any higher concentration, you don't have to put as much in. So I'll take this hydrogen peroxide and pour it in this container. And this is about 5 gallons here. Okay? So I put it in here. 5 gallons, and I'm just taking ordinary water. It's got chlorine in it and everything, you know, it doesn't matter. I'm going to fill this up. That's good right there. That's about 4 gallons, maybe 5, more or less. We don't have to be super precise. And notice I use this air breaker nozzle on here that breaks everything up real well. It gets a little bit more air in there, kind of makes the water a bit more active. Okay, so I've got an H2O2 or H2O2 solution here, and with the water. Now the next thing, you guys have probably never seen anything like this. May scare a few people. There we go. We're making a bath here. I'm gonna just bathe these in here for a few minutes. Kind of funny putting this recently harvested cannabis in water, in H2O2 water. Well, what this does is it sterilizes everything. Like if you get a little cut or something on your hand, you know, you put that hydrogen peroxide on there, you see it bubble up and stuff. Well, that's it eating the infection. Same thing's going on here. It's eating the infection, but in this case, the infection is the mildew. So this is killing it. Exactly, and that's it. It's just killing it. We'll give this a bath for, like I say, 2-3 minutes, maybe as long as 5 minutes. You can let it sit in here longer, but there's really no reason. Oh, there, you can see it. You can see all that crap. Look at this, right across the top. That scum right there is the powdery mildew. So we know that it's not on the plants, it's on the top of the water. Now I can take a sponge and skim that off. That way I can use this water a lot longer. But for just this demonstration purpose, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to skim it off. But like I say, use a sponge or a cloth or something and just pick that up, wring your sponge out, and then do it again, and you get rid of that scum. But look at that. Boy, it's just building up there. You can see it. And that's just a few plants. My God, imagine if there was a whole bunch of it. So the next step here is to pull them out of the water. But notice.
Okay, Jorge showed you how to do it. So now you know. If you have that powdery mildew or you've got it, you can dunk them in the hydrogen peroxide solution. Hey, I want to thank you guys for watching. Again, if you're looking for a doctor to help you get a medical marijuana permit anywhere in the US of A, give us a call at 503-235-4606. If you have any other questions or concerns about marijuana, hemp, or medical marijuana, you can call us at 503-235-4606. Hey, I want to thank you, Dana, for coming out again.
Thanks for
Dana
inviting me.
Canales, thank you guys for watching. We're going to go out on a song by John Cornette that he sang at the 2015 Hempstock Festival. We'll see you next week. Help us restore hemp.
Wow.
We are many.
We are many, we are strong, and so many be so wrong, giving in too many lies. Doesn't anybody really care why? Can it be that we are right? Can we be peaceful through this fight? All we really want to see is humanity set free. We're just one big family. Once united, we are free. Now's the time to make a stand. Do the best that each one can. Just one big family. Once united, we are free. Now's the time to make a stand. Do the best that each one can. Once awakened, we will see the potential of infinity. And abundance will be the norm when we are finally through this storm. Can it be that we are right? Can we be peaceful through this fight? All we really want to see is humanity set free. Just one big family. Once united, we are free. Now's the time to make a stand.